Sabrina, we understand that our legal analyst, Irv Miller, is standing by with you. Is he there and ready to provide some context on this?
Yes. Yes, I can actually bring him over right now. There's
Perfect.
lots of cameras that are in this
I
lobby right now.
No, we understand you're dealing with a very fluid situation.
Lots going on. Yes. So, Irv, were you expecting this to change so quickly today and end the way that it did?
It is not unusual for a defendant on the day of trial to decide, I'm not going anywhere with this trial, I'm going to plead guilty. Not unusual at all. And I suspect that sometime this morning, his lawyers walked back into the lockup and said to him, Mr. Cremo, I have to give an opening statement today. Would you mind telling me what our defense is? What would you like me to tell the jury that your defense is going to be in this trial? And that's when his lawyers looked at him, and he probably figured, might as well plead guilty, I'm going nowhere.
Was it curious, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, like you mentioned, we were trying to think, what would the defense say today? And that's pretty much what many people were waiting for, how they would defend their client. Did that play a role, or even his absence last week? He didn't come to court on Wednesday in all of this.
His absence last week said a lot. For me as a criminal defense lawyer for many years, if the client doesn't care, the jury's not going to care. And his lawyers knew that. And I'm sure they had a heart-to-heart this morning as to what they're going to say, what they're going to do. My thought last week, when I looked ahead to this week, what are his lawyers going to do? They have the right to say, Judge, we're not going to give our opening statement today. We'd like to reserve our time after the state rests. So that was their only other out today in not trying to present a defense to this jury.
Do you think the judge was even taken aback by the decision to change his plea? Because they started the day totally normal. They dismissed a juror, they replaced that juror with an alternate for cause, and they seemed to just be getting underway as normal, but then they recessed within 15 minutes of starting court today.
You know, this judge has been around a long time. She's seen this happen before, where on the day of trial the defendant decides, maybe it's my best interest. Maybe I need to look ahead. The defendant say, maybe I better look ahead 50 years from now. I'm going to be locked up today for the rest of my life, but maybe in 50 years there'll be a governor of the state of Illinois who, if I show remorse today, maybe in the future I can apply for a pardon or for a commutation of sentence rather than doing the rest of his life in jail, which is what he's going to be sentenced to.
So after he agreed to this plea and was asked repeatedly a few times in the first half of the questioning, they went through the facts of the case and they explained the evidence in generalities against Cremo and the video evidence, the photos that they have of him, and they asked him again, do you agree you're doing this consensually? This is something that you were not coerced into.
Right.
Is that standard?
Absolutely. There's a list of things by statute and by Illinois Supreme Court rule that a judge must advise the defendant of at the time of a plea of guilty. You have to go through what a jury is. You have to ask him if he understands what he's doing. Ask him how he thinks his lawyers are doing. Does he have any complaints about his lawyers? The minimum and maximum sentence, well, in this case, the minimum and maximum sentence is the same thing, life. And just ask him, if he has any issues about pleading guilty today, knowing what the sentence is going to be. And as an experienced judge, I'm sure she went through every one of those things in the statute to make sure that he doesn't have any issues on appeal, to appeal this plea today, saying he wasn't advised properly.
And when we think about, we were just talking about the reason behind his parents and getting up and not making a statement. It makes sense that his father would not make a statement today, especially after we see the pretrial proceedings and his previous statements. They've been here through the duration. Does that change any of the dynamics of this case at all? Or, I mean, they're his parents, so they're entitled to be here.
Well, the only dynamic that I saw today that changed my opinion of things is his mother's statement a few minutes ago, saying that this case was removed to federal court, and that's what happened this morning. That can't happen. Cases can be removed to federal court, but when the cases are removed, the first thing that happens in the state court is things are halted, they're stopped. So whatever she said today had no bearing at all on the credible evidence, I'll just say, that was confronting this judge and this defendant and the mom.
When we think about what happens now, so the judge said in April, around April 23rd or so, I believe, on Wednesday in April, they'll have the first sentencing-related hearing. Right. What happens then?
Well, I'm sure she ordered a pre-sentence investigation. Did she do that? I wasn't in the court.
Yes, she did.
And what that is, the probation officer writes a very complete report about a defendant, everything about a person, criminal history, work history, psychological history, everything you could think of, financial issues, for the judge to determine in imposing a sentence. But in this particular case, it really means nothing because the law says a minimum sentence, if you kill more than one person, it's life in the penitentiary with no chance of parole. So that's what the pre-sentence report is. It's kind of a foregone conclusion what the sentence is going to be when it comes up for sentencing.
Is there anything else that needs to be tied up now that we've had this change of, it almost feels strange because you were gearing up for all of this opening statements, testimony, evidence to hear it. She asked every single juror, are you going to be comfortable listening to really intense testimony and seeing graphic imagery? And now we just won't have any of that. Is there anything else that needs to happen now? Well,
for myself, as one who's been in this position many times, having a client plead guilty on the day of trial, this is nothing unusual. For somebody looking in from the outside saying, oh my God, they went through all this, these jury selections, hours and hours over the most boring part of a criminal case, which is jury selection. I could see where the public would say, oh my God, how did this happen? It shouldn't happen this way. But he had a case I think was defenseless. There was no defense for this case. It's an overwhelmingly strong case for the government, and I don't think any choice.
Thank you, Irv.
Thank you.
Guys, do you have any questions for Irv?
Yeah, Sabrina, can you ask him why make the decision? Since this happens so often, why make a decision on the opening day of statements versus he knew what was stacked against him months ago when he was given a plea deal?
So we have a question from Audrina. She's wondering why now? Why not plead guilty earlier when there was even a deal on the table? Why not take that and wait until this moment?
Because he didn't have to. Today, it's, the end of the road. You either start a jury. I mean, technically, even after a jury is hearing evidence, I've seen on rare occasion where somebody may change their plea in the middle of a trial. But typically, this is the day, beginning of opening statements, where defendant usually changes their mind and says, hey, listen, I'm not going anywhere. He sat through how many half days of jury selection? Well, that says a lot. I mean, he didn't want to be confronted with, looking at jurors. Can you imagine him being confronted with the testimony, graphic photographs? I don't think he wanted to do that.
Is there a sense maybe of relief, you think, from those who might have had to testify or had signed up to be witnesses in this case, that they won't have to now do that or relive those moments?
Well, here's the issue. They have the right at a sentencing hearing to get up and give what's known as victim witness statements. And typically they write them out ahead of time, they give them to the prosecutor reviews them, and the judge will decide whether that they can be read in court by the witness, by the victim, by the families, or just the written statements to be read either by the prosecutor or by the judge. But that will be their opportunity to say what's on their mind. I use the word vent, which I think is really important, and it happens a lot of time in criminal cases, especially in a case like this.
I think we're expecting many people to be on that list, especially that there were 48 people on this witness list that we were hearing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Audrina, Jackie, anything?
Sabrina, I guess I'm just curious right now, and I know you've been talking to Irv, so it's hard to tell what's happening around you, but for all of those folks who were inside the courtroom this morning, I mean, are they still outside? Are they gathering it in any way? And again, it might be hard to see where you are right now, but I'm just curious if some of those folks have stuck around.
Right. Well, we've seen some people walk out since we've been standing in the lobby here. Of course, you saw Robert Crimo III's parents leave. There are more than one entrance and exit to this building, so it's unclear if there are some folks that are still upstairs. We do know that there are some people that were in a room on the second floor, whereas the courtroom itself was on the 8th floor, so it was a second overflow room for community members. There were a few, I would say a dozen people that were here earlier today checking in and getting their phones, but it is possible that they're just taking a moment to process the entire situation. People have to check their phones away at this courthouse, so they have to make time to get their phones and their belongings back, and maybe just taking a moment to themselves before coming down, knowing that all of these cameras are lined up here. Makes sense that they might want to exit out of a different way or just take a moment. So right now we haven't seen many people walk out other than the few that we mentioned, but it's possible that people do start coming and trickling down as time goes on.